So today I am so pumped to be reconnecting with my former client and good friend, Tracy Cioffi. Tracy is currently the CMO of the Bay Club Company, a sports, recreation, and active lifestyle brand on the West Coast with 26 locations and 135,000 members. That is a lot. Where she's been for just over 5 years. You know, one of the most interesting things about Tracy's career, though, is how varied it's been across categories. So prior to the Bay Club Company, Tracy served as CMO at Mod Pizza, which that brand has an amazing story. She was also EVP of marketing at Sur La Table, of which I'm a customer, and my credit card would tell you that in a pretty significant way. She was also VP and head of marketing at See's Candies, another brand with an amazing history, and also held marketing leadership roles at Sports Authority, PacSun, and The Gap. But wherever Tracy's been, she's been a builder. She's been a builder of brands, of business transformation platforms, and of people. She's a highly competitive human who knows how to lead with empathy and how to bring teams together to achieve more than they thought possible. And I know she's got some amazing stories to share with us today. Tracy, my friend, it is so good to have you.
Okay, Kurt. So I'm so happy to be here. So thank you for having me on.
I know. It's been too long since we got to reconnect. This is a great platform. I know. So obviously, I just rattled off a little bit of your career history, but we always start these podcasts off by allowing our guests to share their story. So what would you like listeners to know about you and your story?
I know, even hearing the story, you always sit back, you're like, wow.
I know.
There's been a lot to this journey, never straight road, always a wild journey. I think early on, I learned to love brands and brands that had a story to tell. So even in my early 20s, I'll start a little bit of how I got things started and how I learned about that. But I'm from Northern California. So when I graduated, I, said, oh, got to go work in Silicon Valley because that's what you did. And I started in tech sales in the late 90s. And it was just around the e-commerce was becoming a thing. And, I was
right before the dot-com bust.
Exactly. Yeah. I was, taking orders on inside sales phones, and me and my boss said, there's this e-commerce thing going on. I think we should break off and build that and see what comes. And we did. And we learned how to code and UI and UX. And we, late 90s, we were learning how to do it ourselves. And, within a couple months, we were blowing the doors off the sales of the inside, the guys on the phone. And that's why I said, this is cool. During that process, I went to this dinner. My dad's did executive placement. And I went to one of his dinners and I sat next to this awesome woman and we hit it off and we started talking. And she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm building websites. And, and she said, so I work for The Gap. and we launched Gap.com. And what kind of products are you selling? I said, SCSI cables and CD recording software. And she said, okay, you are way too cool to be doing that. Why don't you join The Gap? We've just launched Gap.com. We're about to launch Old Navy and BananaRepublic.com. Come on board with us and let's do this in e-commerce. And I did. I packed up my bags. I moved to San Francisco. And so I was part of something that was so cool, right?
I was going to say, what a time to be alive. I mean...
It was so cool, right? And again, to go in at that time, so I think it was 99 when I joined. Mm-hmm. And, you have this $25 billion company that's on fire at that time. They were doing so well, yet we got to build something new. We were these kind of crazy tech kids. They kept us away from corporate. We were down in a different section of San Francisco. They kind of didn't know what we were up to. And we built this amazing thing. But while I was there, I learned the power of brand storytelling, just being exposed to The Gap and being exposed to Old Navy. And so, I think early in my 20s, I got that brand storytelling bug, I would say. I also learned that I loved gritty, get it done, figure it out culture. People always ask me, why did you leave? You kind of left at the height of e-commerce for the Gap brands. You guys were the biggest and the best. And why did you leave? I said, it kind of got too big. Right? It kind of got, when I was sitting in a room and there was 17 executives making a decision on an email, I said, I'm out, right? This doesn't feel like me anymore. And since then, I've continued to look for brands that have a story to tell, as well as a kind of gritty, figure it out culture. And sometimes you can look at my background and say, really? Like See's? Was that? No, See's had this amazing story to tell, which they weren't necessarily telling, right? Yeah. I was like, you were very much a part of that.
Especially outside of California, right?
Oh,
that was
correct.
a big chunk.
I mean, even in California, they weren't even telling all of the richness and the story that they had to tell, as well as, I always called it, I know you know this, I called it my 90-year-old startup because everything, it's a little bit chitty chitty bang bang era, a little bit with, we had to build e-commerce, we had to build the call center, we had to build all these amazing things around a great product.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what I just fell in love with brand storytelling early on. And I know what kind of culture I look for.
So talk about that sort of critical mass, because most of the stops you've been, to your point, like you reach a point like, okay, we have lost that sense of grittiness and sort of scrappiness that you thrive in.
Yep.
And then do you decide, like, is that what gives you the wandering eye? Because some brands, you've been fortunate to be with companies, and we'll talk more about Bay Club here in a second, but you've been fortunate to be with companies that had this really interesting genesis of a story. I mean, even Sur La Table, up in Seattle, and how that brand started and evolves. And so talk about getting to that critical mass and like why you loved being in that scrappy stage of being able to bring that story to life.
Yeah, C's is such a great one to use. Again, I have a feeling, again, when you say the wandering eye, and I know you've pinged me like, wow, you're still at Bay Club. You've hit that 5-year point. Why are you still there? So we're going to have to get into that, because I do have that wandering eye. I do get to a point where I feel like, okay, we did what we said we were going to do, right? We rebuilt X, Y, and Z, and I have this high functioning team, and you don't need me anymore. Mm-hmm. So once I feel like, when I looked at C's Candy at a certain point and I said, you don't need me anymore. You guys are killing it as a team, and we've done everything we say we're going to do. So I feel like I'm on to next, right? And what's different here at the Bay Club, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about who the Bay Club is, but so my CEO, Matthew Stevens, we both love that gritty, figure it out, late stage startup nature. So our goal is to keep it that way as we grow. Right. Awesome. And you can hear like Steve Jobs talk about being a forever startup, right? If that's in your nature, if that's in your DNA, and you both can stay that way and keep it lean and mean on the inside.
Yeah.
Right. Build the right teams with the right spirit that can do that. Right. Then you keep me. So Matthew's like, you're not going anywhere. I was like, no, right now I'm still good. I'm not having that feeling.
So let's talk about that story. Yeah. So again, how you've been able to maintain that sense of culture within Bay Club, but we'll talk about the genesis, because outside of the West Coast, or I guess now in Oregon and Washington, with some recent acquisitions that you guys have had, tell the nation about Bay Club.
Yeah. So, Bay Club is so fascinating. So right now, as you said in the opener, we have 26 clubs from Seattle down to San Diego. So we're hugging the West Coast as of right now, but that soon will change. We're acquiring fast and furious. We only grow via acquisition. So we don't build. We know what we do well. We know what we don't. And our clubs can vary. I mean, it can be a high-end fitness center. It can be a resort-like tennis and swim club. It can be a large-scale golf club. Right. Okay. And so our clubs they vary. I think what's super interesting about us, and storytelling specifically, it's not about necessarily the product or the beautiful clubs or whatever we have. Yeah, we have those. We know that. But it's really about the communities that we operate in and the members, right? This is the first time I don't have customers. I have members. And that is gold. Where do you work for somewhere that people are coming to you 6 to 7 days a week, right? Their life is at your place.
Yep.
Right. And so it's been so fun to be a part of something like that. Right. And each community is so different, and they can be relatively close to each other. So I live in the South Bay in Los Gatos, about an hour and a half south of San Francisco. And we have multiple clubs that are maybe 20 minutes apart, but they're so, so very different because of the communities that make them up. Right. And so
interesting.
Talk about storytelling.
So how do you think about that from a master brand perspective of Bay Club and what your promise is versus, okay, this is a country club here, and then this might be, hey, it's a pool and some gym facilities over there, or something, it might be more of a tennis club over here. Yep. So like, what is that thread that connects all those for Bay Club?
Truly the thread is community. That is the thread. And it's knowing that each one is unique, right? And having to deliver in a different way for each one. And it is incredibly difficult to get your head around as a marketer when you come in here. I always say it's the smallest company I've ever worked for, and it's the most difficult to truly get your arms around as you get here, right? You think, oh, here's the Bay Club, it's cookie cutter, we can, roll these different things out. And then as you really get into it and you really spend time at each one of the communities, with each one of the teams, you realize, oh my gosh, like they're so different. But the center is community and heart and soul of each one, right? So that is the thread, even though they uniquely show up in different ways.
And so do you, how do you work with each of those clubs to help give them a level of autonomy? Because, hey, what they have to offer from an amenity perspective and where they specifically are located are quite bespoke. And so how do you let them say, okay, well, we're the Bay Club, but our version of the Bay Club from a storytelling perspective and connecting with our members looks like X.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
Yeah, I would say, and everyone says this, when you talk to the big corporate guys, they all say, oh, we're decentralized and we let our field, lead. This is the first company I've been at that truly does that. Our field leaders are responsible for their clubs. They are responsible for their communities. And we here at corporate in San Francisco are in service to them and are in service to their members, right? I have not actually seen that in practice before. And I know you're in and out of all kinds of
sure.
companies. Everyone says it. This is the first company I've actually seen do it. We have incredible leaders in all of our regions, and the people that they hire and the people that they employ they're delivering for our members, right? And we're truly in service. And we're small here. Our corporate office is less than 50 people.
Wow.
Yeah. We're lean and mean.
How many people are on your team specifically, just out of curiosity?
Like 12 and that's everyone, right? Everyone. And then I lean, as I always do, heavily on our network, right? So I keep all of design and copy outside. I believe it gives us, we're more flexible. Now there's people who've been with us. I have one designer who I absolutely adore, and she's been with me for years and years and years at different companies, but she does better on the outside. She only wants to do 20 to 30 hours a week. Great. That works for her. That works for us, right? So we keep a lot on the outside. We work with some smaller agencies, again, nimble, quick guys who can move and pivot with us. But we keep it lean and mean on the inside. Okay,
very cool. So talk about the places you've been, and not just deciding to work at a particular place, but even when you're there, what do you look for when you're bringing stories to life?
They have to be real, and I think you have to work really hard at that. At bringing the actual stories out. It takes a lot of work to get to them. I think Sur La Table was a great example of that. When I first got there, they had this rich history of how they started and the first cataloger and, down at Pike's Place Market in Seattle. They had this rich history. And I think over time, anyone does, you lose a bit of that storytelling. You're just selling gadgets.
Yep.
Right. So when I was there and I had a great team around me, I had this wonderful head of culinary there, Joel Gamron, who's just incredible. And him and I spent a lot of time together of like, why does Sur La Table exist? Why? It's not to sell gadgets. It's not to make a great meal. What is it? Right. I remember we had this one meeting where we sat in a room. I think there was about 10 of us, and we sat in a room and we served a meal, we ate family style, and we talked about why do we exist, right? And it came down to being at the table together.
Yep.
That's why Sur La Table exists, right? It was about getting families and friends together at the table to put their phones down and to actually connect. That's why we existed, right? And then from there, we were able to go out and tell these rich stories about being together at the table, right? And it was a lot of hard work to get there. I think a lot of people skim surfaces, right?
Well, and I think you have to balance that, especially at Sur La Table, because you're such a massive retailer with such a massive product catalog. So understanding the role, their ability to enable you to bring people together at the table in a meaningful way, not just for any meal, but for something that was curated and prepared with what they have to offer to facilitate and enable that experience is kind of where the magic is, right?
Correct. And again, if you talk about like a very clear example of storytelling in that meeting, we're sitting at this big long table talking about why we exist. And Joel Gagnon, again, this wonderful chef sitting there. And he said, okay, I'll tell you why I cook, right? He was our national chef on TV. I'll tell you what I cook. My parents got divorced when I was young. And he said, Nobody came to the table anymore. We didn't talk anymore as a family. He said, I felt this incredible loss. And he, I think he was the youngest of three. And he said, so what I did is I learned how to cook. He said, I learned how to cook because when I cooked on Sundays, I could get my family back to the table. My mom and my dad weren't seeing eye to eye at that point in life, came back to the table out of respect to me, their youngest son, right? To sit at the table and enjoy Joel's meal. He was like, I changed my life. I changed my family's life based on cooking and bringing people together. And it was literally that one story that he told that set us on this journey of Sur La Table and saying, this is why we exist. I mean, it was so cool. It was so cool that he was able to share that.
Well, talk about how you took that narrative of bringing people together and you guys thought about creating content in very different ways, because I remember you guys created a show.
We did.
Talk about that a little bit, because that was a great series.
We did, and this was a while ago now, right?
I know.
It was 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
We created a cooking show. We did online cooking classes. Again, it was all around. We did a lot of experiential events.
Yep.
Big, long tables, bringing different people together. And again, yes, the food was fantastic because that's what Sur La Table is about. But it was all about being together and storytelling together. And it was an incredible time. And it was. You think about Williams-Sonoma does the same thing, right? It was always, people are always like, oh, I'm confused, Williams-Sonoma versus Sur La Table. And it was like, Williams-Sonoma, I always thought as the beautiful place to buy gifts. But I always thought as the marble, right? The marble kitchen that maybe you didn't actually cook in. Or Sur La Table was the sauce on the counter and, throwing salt over the shoulder. And so, we started to differentiate ourselves.
Flour all over the place. Exactly.
I was like, Sur La Table got messy with you. Where I have the friends who are the Williams-Sonoma kitchens that you wouldn't dare cook in.
Oh my gosh. Talk about Mod Pizza, because that's a very different brand with a very different genesis of how they came to be and how they look at bringing people into to work at their stores. I thought was one of the most meaningful parts of their story.
Yeah, and again, why I chose to go there. So I was living in Seattle. I had the wandering eye, as you call it. I felt like Sur La Table was okay. We did what we were going to do, and now what? And I had felt like I had been selling things for too long. I was also down the street, when you're sitting in Seattle and you're down the street from Amazon and you're selling things, and every time Amazon gets into a category, it takes your things away. It makes it difficult. So I started questioning, what am I doing and what can I go do differently? And I started talking to Mod Pizza, and yes, they had a great product and it was cool, fast casual, and they, their stores were each unique. Even though they were the fastest growing fast casual restaurant in the United States, it was more when you got under the covers on them. That was again, the story. And, some people may know this, some may not, but they're a second chance employer. So around 30% of their employees are second chance employees. So prison release programs, people who have been in prison or somehow involved there and getting out and are trying to get back on their feet. And it's incredibly difficult to get back on your feet if you cannot get a job.
Right.
So, and when there's Dave's Killer Bread, there's a few guys who lean in hard to the second chance employers, but not many. And I understand why. It's difficult. It's incredibly difficult to do it properly and to do it well. But Mod Pizza leaned in, and that's how they got me. It wasn't because they were the fastest growing restaurant. It wasn't because they had great pizza and salads. It was because they were leaning in on something that mattered. And again, I saw the ups and downs of it, but it was an incredible mission.
It's awesome. So looking out amongst the world of brands telling stories, what do you see in overabundance? Like, what is just oversaturated? It's like, oh my God, if I hear another example of X.
You guys had sent me some of these questions prior, obviously, and I was like, oh gosh, everything is in overabundance right now. I'll be honest, like, everyone's telling me when to get up and what to eat and what to do. And I'm like, leave me alone, right? Leave me alone. But that also led me, Kiker, you also asked who is telling great stories?
Yeah.
And I really had to sit back and think, there is the guys who have done it consistently well for a very long time. Patagonias, Nikes, they do it. They tell great stories. They live it, right? Seemingly, they seem to live it. And those guys are great. But when I sat back and thought about this question, and said, who has changed my behavior via a story? It was Dove.
Okay.
Dove. So about, I would say, and again,
Real beauty we're talking about.
Yeah.
Real beauty campaign.
Yep. So I have small kiddos. I'm actually a Brady Buncher. So I have 2 kiddos. He has 2 kiddos. So we have 4 under the age of 12. Right. So I'm living that life, and I'm looking at things through that filter. And I would say about 3 years ago, I saw the first real beauty ad from Dove, and it stopped me in my tracks with social media. I actually fully that day went off all social media channels except for LinkedIn.
Wow.
So I have not been on Instagram, and right, I'm a CMO. People are like, how's that possible? I'm like, it is. I personally have not been on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram since I watched. Literally, I remember where I was when I watched it in the kitchen, and I went off and I deleted all of my accounts, and I never ever went back because it was so impactful to see what social media, the harmful effects of social media to young children. And I believe, living in a household with 4 under 12, that they do what you do and not what you say. And so how can I be spending all my time scrolling on Instagram and TikTok and then tell them not to? And so I went off. And you know what I think is really cool is you'll hear my kids, and I hear it and I love it when I hear them say it. They'll be like, you know what? My mom's super cool and she's not on that stuff. And I'm always like, they still think I'm cool. I'm going to ride that for as long as I can.
I was going to say, because I think a lot of kids look for their parents for validation that they're liking the same things on Instagram. I mean, I know I do with my daughter, and it's one of the unique ways that we connect. But I think we're all leery of the dangers. So talk about. I'm just going back to your current role with Bay Club, and obviously, because I see the activity on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it might be.
Yep.
How do you stay connected, guide your teams, making sure that they're connecting with your members and with your communities the right way when you have personally disassociated yourself with that?
Yeah, and my team knows that. My team knows my personal stance.
Right.
That's not my stance for the company. Now, we do have conversations about it, right? We do make sure anything we're posting doesn't have filters, is real. We actually use all of our members in all of our ads. Everything is our members. We do member casting calls, which is super cool, right? We put out and say, all right, we're gonna film about XYZ, and we have all of our members send in videos about their stories, right? And then we select a few in different regions and we go out and film with them. So that's a way that I have tried to keep it real with this brand, which is hard because we are in we are around fitness, but we don't take the stance of kind of the sexy fitness. We're real. we're the real deal.
I love that. So talk about one or two of those stories that you got from members that you're just like, wow, okay, this is a meaningful moment of impact, and we're honored that they want to talk about how we've been able to help them.
There's so many. When we did our first casting call, it was so I had been here a year or so, and it was during COVID, and so some of our clubs were closed, some of our clubs were open, right? We were kind of just we were surviving. We said, let's go out and we're going to do photography, but we're just going to send a videographer.
Right.
We'll just see what happens. And we just said, just ask them, what does the Bay Club mean to them? It was with Angela Barnard, right? So Angela and I send a photographer and a videographer out. We say, let's see what we get. When we got it back, Angela and I, we couldn't keep our eyes off of these stories that these people were telling of what the Bay Club meant to them. I mean, literally tears in your eyes of, especially during COVID, coming out of COVID, this was my place to reconnect again with people, with family.
Yep.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And then you also hear stories of kind of what I would call rituals, daily rituals. Okay. Yeah. We have this beautiful club in San Francisco called Gateway. It's not too far here from the corporate office. It's unbelievable. Swim and tennis club in the middle of San Francisco. You don't even know it's there. It's behind these gates, and you go in, and it's palm trees and pools, and it's unbelievable. And I was there one morning, super, super early, maybe like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I saw this couple in their late 80s. He rolled, she was in a wheelchair. He brought her to the pool, helped her get out. Then he joined her in the lane, and they did this beautiful, they swam for 30, 45 minutes together in their lane. And I looked over at Jake Stafford, who runs that club. And I said, Jake, what's the story here? Right. And he said, they've been coming here every day. They come every single day at 6 a.m. to swim together. This is their ritual. They've been doing this for over 30 years.
Wow.
And you just, right. And then of course, Jake said, would you like to meet them? Of course. Right. And in comes because they have that relationship. So then I can now sit on the side of the pool and hear their story and hear how this developed. And it's gold.
It's amazing.
Gold. And there's
I love it.
Hundreds, thousands of these stories at every one of our clubs. And it's up to us to connect with those people enough that they're willing and able to tell those stories. Right. But it's good.
Well, and that you don't do it for commercial purposes.
No.
In that like these are stories that people need to hear about rituals. And you know what, if somebody never joins the Bay Club, but they get moved by something like this, then great. That's okay.
Great. We did and also when you just talk about different channels and different things, also when I was here, I also know that we have products and we need to tell those stories.
Sure.
Right. So like we just launched Active Recovery, where people can go in and be in cryo chairs and massage therapy and all that kind of stuff. So that was and I know we have to talk about those things too.
Sure.
Right. So, but I always want to do it in a different way that doesn't feel like that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I had this wonderful woman who I met on my team when I first got here. She was here and I was sitting across from her and I said, God, she's got something that I need to lean into. She's got a superpower that I need to lean into. She can tell stories I just knew that if I put her on video, that she could tell really cool stories. Her name's Marissa. And so I literally was sitting in a room and I took out a piece of paper and I wrote Marissa Tries. And I looked at her and I said, if I put you on the road and you went to our different clubs and you tried different things with a videographer, we recorded you and we started a little show, called Marissa Tries. Are you into it? Oh yeah, no problem. So we're now 2 years into this show. We launched the first of every month. Marissa goes out and she just tries something at the Bay Club, right? So
love it.
And she's a little bit I Love Lucy. Huh. She's been here for 8 years and she's got this little bit of I Love Lucy. She's fully unscripted. It's her and one videographer and they show up at the club and they try something. My goal also while she's trying is to educate. So if she's trying, for instance, we sent her out to do rowing in the club. Rowing was like a big thing when a couple of those rowing movies came out. I said, go out. Everyone hurts themselves on rowing. So go try rowing, but then get a couple people who know really what's up and talk to them on film so that you leave also, maybe you watch the 8 minutes, you understand what we have, you learn a little bit, you take a little bit away, right? But we're showing all the things that the Bay Club has through this really cool, hilarious voice.
Yeah.
I mean, she now can't go anywhere. Anywhere we go with her, people run up, are you Marissa from Marissa? It's great.
That's awesome. Look what you guys have created, a persona.
It's really cool. And now partners, people reach out to us and say, we just did one with Canyon Ranch. Canyon Ranch launched a new property up here in Northern California. And they said, could you send Marissa out? Could she try Canyon Ranch Woodside? We said, absolutely. And so now she's kind of trying other things.
I love that.
We're getting creative about the stories you have to tell also.
So, yeah, for sure. So speaking of technology, and I love it that when you talked about, basically being at the very start of Gap.com and LilDavid.com. And so now you think about technology in a very different, evolved way for Bay Club. And so whether that's, technology used to communicate and foster good relationships with your members and their communities. But from a marketing perspective, how have you guys embraced technology? How do you think about it?
Yeah, we definitely, again, you're coming to us 6 to 7 days a week. So first and foremost, we want to make that easy, right? So whether getting into the club is easy because you're going to do it on your phone, you check in via your phone, right? Is that app good enough, right? For a smooth entrance. And then booking, like we use technology for all of our bookings. So if you're booking a court for tennis or golf So again, we're very leaned in there. Again, we're in your pocket. And you're using us a lot. But then in terms of storytelling, it's a little bit across the board. We have a really wide range when it comes to, yes, we've got these really young up and comers who are in our clubs and they're fully technology focused, but then we've got a lot of older members that I need to speak to them in a way that makes sense. We still I actually personally write a newsletter that goes out to our membership base every other week. So I write the entire intro. It's got, it's at a little TLC. So a little TLC comes out and it's talking about like what's happening in sports and active lifestyle or some kind of cool tip or something we're leaning in on. And then the rest of it is all about what's happening at your specific club. So we're a little bit, make it easy, right? Whether you're booking childcare, racket sports, whatever it is, and then make sure we're aligning to your communication channel because we have varied ages, I would say.
That's great. So looking ahead over the next 5 to 10 years, and of course you won't have a wandering eye because you are so happy at the Bay Club. But how do you see storytelling evolving? Like what's going to happen when over the next few years? Whether it's I won't dive into the AI world and all the things that we know it's already doing to storytelling, but how do you see it evolving?
Gosh, I hope it just feels very noisy right now, right? I feel like there's so much coming at us in so many different ways. I hope it slows down, becomes more meaningful is my hope. Maybe that's nuts. But then again, I'm not on a lot of platforms. I want to go back to a flip phone. I'm that person. I hope it slows down and becomes more meaningful.
I think that I hope that there's a bit of a, I don't know if it's a regression is the right word, but I think that there are, the fundamentals to us of great storytelling, and I talk about it in my intro, like those are pretty transcendent. Like what makes a compelling story is a compelling story. Now, it could be a book. It could be it could be a TikTok video in 30 seconds and, learning how to communicate in sound bites. And I think we can learn how to tell great stories in all these formats. But to me, the fundamentals and what I love about your career is that you go places where you don't have to manufacture stories. They're there to be chiseled away and uncovered, and they're right there for you. It's almost like Michelangelo sees the block and he knows what's in it and can just uncover it and tells the story. So I really appreciate that about where you've been.
Yep, Kiker, that's so beautifully said. That's absolutely when I'm talking to a company or a brand, that's exactly what I'm looking for. When I was walking around Seas, they were touring me during the interview process, and they didn't even know it, but that's what I was looking for, right? Was those, and it was gold. There was so many nuggets that they didn't realize because their average tenure maybe was 30 to 40 years of an executive, so they just didn't even realize they had all these amazing nuggets, but that's what it is. Yeah. I'm looking for those stories that are already there.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, when you walk by and you see the actual conveyor belt that Lucy and Ethel were working on,
amazing,
it's
right?
kind of one of those amazing things. Yeah,
they have
absolutely.
Mary C's recipes still handwritten in books. I mean, that's just, it's gold.
It is. Well, this conversation has been gold, and it's been so good to connect with you, my friend. And I'm so happy for your success. Thank you. I look forward to seeing where the Bay Club goes with your leadership.
Thank you, because there's no wandering eye here. I'm staying.
No, you're staying. From your lips to your boss's ears through this podcast.
That's right.
There it goes.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks,
Tracy. Appreciate it. Giant Stories is a production of Medium Giant and our parent company, the Dallas News Corporation. Interested in learning more about how your brand's story can be better told and sold? Visit mediumgiant.co or send an email to hello@mediumgiant.co.